plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. Dr. Mary is a technical officer on the conservation and sustainable use of of genetic resources for food and agriculture and farmers' rights. She has over 25 years of experience on natural resources management, implementation of development programs and projects on dynamic conservation and management of biodiversity for food and agriculture, sustainable agriculture and rural development. Dr. Mary, please.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Good morning. A very pleasant day to all of you. And before I begin my presentation, I would like to sincerely thank the organizers for the invitation, His Royal Highness, and especially in particular to Dr. Abdullah Al-Musa for giving this opportunity for FAO and the International Treaty to make a presentation on this important conference whose topic is very important to all of us. And I hope you can hear me well. Please excuse me if I would turn off my video because sometimes my internet connection is very weak. So if that is the case, please excuse me for turning off my video. So, okay. Yeah, now my presentation is about farmers' rights under the international treaty. This is farmers' rights. This is not human rights. Here we are talking of the rights of farmers related to plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. First, let me remind all of us why plant genetic resources for food and agriculture are so important and why we are having this discussion. As we all know, plant genetic resources is the important foundation of agriculture. Agricultural research and plant breeding depend on access to a broad range of plant genetic diversity. This is really very critical to food security, which is the basic building blocks for providing crops with resistance to diseases, pests, environmental stresses brought by climate change, and to improving yields and nutritional quality. And if I may quote, the Secretary of the International Treaty, Mr. Kent Nadushi, said that crop diversity is the life insurance for our food production. So let's continue talking about when did farmers' rights born or became a topic. The first use of farmers' rights concept, or as a political concept, it can be dated back to the early 1980s. The term came from the civil society activists who highlighted the valuable but unrewarded contributions of farmers to crop diversity. At the beginning, the idea developed as a way of countering increased demand for plant breeders' rights being voiced at the time in international negotiations. It soon emerged as a way of drawing attention to the unremunerated innovations of generations of farmers who provided the foundation of all modern plant breeding. Then please note that farmers' rights is significantly different from plant breeders' rights. Plant breeders' rights are a form of intellectual property rights created to provide incentives, especially to the private sector, those who are engaged in plant breeding. They are defined by the International Convention for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants as exclusive rights granted to a person over the commercial production and marketing of reproductive vegetative propagating material of the protected variety. And in 1992, the Convention on Biological Diversity adopted. With that, together, is a resolution urging the FAO to commence negotiations for a legally binding international instrument on the management of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, and that include the questions on farmers' rights. So the international treaty, after very long negotiation, finally it was adopted in 2001 and entered into force in 2004. The international treaty is the only international treaty whose primary purpose is to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of crop genetic diversity, which form the basis of global food security. It makes sure the plants that feed the world continue to exist and remain available for the common good of all. The adoption of the international treaty represents an international consensus that the protection and promotion of farmers' rights is one way through which countries can achieve the conservation and sustainable use objectives. So now, under the international treaty, as you would see in the diagram, the concept of farmers' rights derives legitimacy from the important role of farmers in all regions of the world have played over the generations and continue to play in conserving, improving, and making available plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, which are the foundation of agricultural systems and food security in the world. So under the international treaty, farmers' rights covered protection of traditional knowledge, equitable participation in sharing benefits, participation in making decisions, and the right that farmers have to save, use, exchange, and sell farm-saved seed propagating material. Of course, all of these are all related to plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. So to speak, the international treaty is the only legally binding international agreement that recognizes the rights of farmers. And the international treaty gives national governments responsibility for implementing farmers' rights through provisions. So the rationale of farmers' rights is to provide farming communities rewards for their contribution to agro-biodiversity and give them incentives to continue improving and making available the plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. The concept of farmers' rights are therefore based on equity considerations and conservation concerns. And it is also an acknowledgement that farmers and their local and indigenous communities are innovators too, and as such, they deserve recognition and rewards. So the debate regarding protection of traditional knowledge has also revolved around the difference and relevance of the distinction between traditional knowledge and local indigenous knowledge. But whatever the difference, many international instruments and organizations like WIPO, the CBD, UNESCO, and others have recognized the need to recognize, protect, and promote traditional knowledge of farmers and their local and indigenous communities. The CBD, for instance, recognizes and asserts that the knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous and local communities are essential for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and that they must be recognized and protected. So another aspect of farmers' rights under the international treaty is the equitable participation in sharing benefits arising from the utilization of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. Farmers' rights were adopted to allow farmers, their communities, and countries in all regions to participate fully in the benefits derived at present and in the future, and from the improved use of plant genetic resources through plant breeding and other scientific methods. These aspects of farmers' rights directly flows from the major objectives of the treaty and the CBD. So here, another aspects of participation is in decision-making at the national matters on related on matters related to the conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources. This is very important as well. This represents a recommendation for contracting parties. When we say contracting parties, these are the members of the international treaty. And then to strengthen the representation of farmers or farming communities in decision-making bodies according to its country's existing institutions. And we are observing more and more now that many farmers organizations are represented in all international processes and negotiations. So the last item of farmers' rights under the international treaty are the seeds, or the right of farmers to save, use, exchange, and sell farm-saved seed. It is very important because most of farmers, smallholders particularly, subsistence farming communities whose livelihoods are dependent on farming. They rely on their own seeds, and seeds is very crucial for them. The importance of these rights is recognized as well in the preambular text of the international treaty, and implicitly acknowledges that farmers may have the right to save, use, exchange, and sell farm-saved seeds, although it is provided that it is in accordance to national settings. However, the treaty subject the farmers' rights to national law, which means that the governments have the absolute discretion to determine whether or not to recognize and protect the right, the extent of protection, if any, and the means of protection. And also farmers' rights are also provided or supportive with other articles exist in the international treaty. For example, Article 5 which deals about conservation of plant genetic resources, Article 6 that deals about sustainable use of plant genetic resources. All these involve farmers' rights. But then we are talking of farmers' rights. What does it really mean? And why does farmers' rights matter? Farmers' rights is very important because it's the right of farmers that helps farmers to promote on-farm and in-situ conservation. And we know that a significant amount of local crop diversity can only be maintained at farmers' field. And also we know that on-farm management, it facilitates the continuous local adaptation of farmers' varieties and land races over time. We also know that promoting the rights of farmers, it promotes food sovereignty, it promotes cultural identity and diversity, and it promotes sustaining the role of farmers as custodians, as innovators, as conservers, and as consumers of biodiversity. And as we all know, the crop diversity and varietal diversity at farmers' field is a live repository. They serve as a reservoir and natural backup for ex situ collections worldwide. But speaking of implementing and realization of farmers' rights, do we have opportunities, or what are the opportunities that exist? We know that at the moment, for the last decade, there is an increasing attention to recognition of the role of indigenous local communities and farmers. I believe that is a great opportunity. And also nowadays, there are more and more discussions about complementarity of the formal seed sector and the local seed systems. But there is a need to ensure that there is a legal space for each to contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources. And you would also notice that many development programs, technical cooperations, and initiatives support awareness raising and capacity development in areas of biodiversity for food and agriculture. And as previously mentioned, in international negotiations, we see that there is more and more increasing level of participation of farmers, or the farmers leaders being in the international discussions or negotiations. And also during this pandemic, we saw the important role of farmers. If the health workers are the frontliners, we have farmers who are our frontliners for food security. Farmers from around the world, they are doing everything they can to prevent the coronavirus crisis to becoming a hunger crisis. So that obviously the role of farmers, we have seen it as a very, very important. So in practice, what are farmers' rights? Currently, the international treaty received a lot of submissions from governments, countries, and stakeholders about how they implement, how they realize farmers' rights. So an example of recognition of farmers' rights is providing awards and recognition of guardians of farmers for their contribution to the conservation and development. For example, in Indonesia, in Latin America, and in many other parts of the world, they provide a recognition for farmers. They give awards, they give plaques, they give trophy, and plus monetary awards for example, in plant breeding, for farmers who able to breed a particular crop for resistance to pests and diseases, they receive awards. And also for farmers who are who maintained the broadest or the widest, the most number of the diversity in their farm, they receive awards and they are being recognized. For example, the globally important agricultural heritage systems, they are reservoirs of biodiversity. It is also a kind of awards. And for example, biodiversity conservation sites, those are kind of examples that countries are provided as examples of recognition of farmers. And there are also many approaches to encourage farmers to convert conservation activities into marketable incomes, so that farmers would be motivated to conserve their diversity. So those are also examples. And then for protecting traditional knowledge from misuse or appropriations, cataloging, making registries, and other forms of documentation is also seen an example to protect traditional knowledge of our farmers and indigenous communities. And many examples provided also refer to in situ on-farm conservation and management of crop diversity, community biodiversity management, and conservation sites. There are also examples talking about or promoting community seed banks. This is one of the best examples in promoting farmers' rights, because community seed banks means a lot to farming communities, but also to national centers or national governments, because community seed bank provides a platform between and among farmers to exchange seeds, to exchange knowledge and experiences, a lot of things. And also community seed banks has different names from every regions or from every countries. For example, it can be called seed lots or seed house, or in Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, they have seed networks or seed clubs, which are measures that could help or improve farmers' choices of a wider diversity of plant genetic resources. And not only that, there are also examples of promoting farmers' rights by participatory plant breeding and varietal selections, and capacity development, empowering farmers or supporting farmers, and many other things, including legal measures. Like, for example, in India, there is a Farmers' Rights Act, which guarantees and promote the rights of farmers to their seeds. But these are just some enumeration of what do we mean farmers' rights in practice. These are just some of examples, and of course, it's there are a lot that is around. And to give you a brief update in the international treaty in the governing body in 2017, they established the ad hoc technical expert group on farmers' rights with a mandate to produce an inventory of national measures that may be adopted, best practices and lessons learned from the realization of farmers' rights as set out in the international treaty. Right now, the inventory is endorsed by the governing body at the last session in 2019. So you can have a look at of this inventory in the submission page of the international treaty, and the ongoing work on options for encouraging, guiding, and promoting the realization of farmers' rights as set out in the international treaty is ongoing. So we are hoping that by the end of this year, which we are going to have the governing body, these options will be presented, and we hope the governing body to endorse or adopt the options that is aimed to guide and promote further the implementation of farmers' rights. So in summary, under the international treaty, there is no definition of farmers' rights, but it simply describes the measures that need to be undertaken by the contracting parties and the stakeholders. However, the realization of farmers' rights falls under the responsibility of national governments and the adoption of measures. So national governments, they are free to enact, to promote and promulgate any laws, any provisions for implementing farmers' rights. But although there is no binding agreement for the strict implementation of farmers' rights, it is clear that farmers need to be supported. As we have seen, for example, in the crisis that we are facing now, the role of farmers in producing in food security, both at global and at local level, is very important. They are our frontliner for food security, and they need to be supported to continue the role as stewards of plant genetic diversity in agriculture. And so at the moment we have a list of national measures, best practices, and lessons learned from the realization of farmers' rights, which we intend to promote it more. And then the work of the expert group on developing options is ongoing, and we are hoping to have it so that we can circulate, we can disseminate this information, because the problem or the challenge on the implementation of farmers' rights, many countries or many governments have the will to implement, but they don't have the capacity or they don't have the idea how farmers' rights can be realized. So with this inventory and with the options, we are hoping that more and more countries will promote the implementation of farmers' rights. And just for the information of all the participants, we have educational module on farmers' rights that is available in the international treaty. And also there is an interactive course version of this module that is available in the Informeia. This is the information for all multilateral environment agreements. And also in the international treaty, we have other modules available, like, for example, the international treaty, conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources, multilateral systems. All these modules are available in the international treaty web page. And last, before ending my presentations, I would like to invite everyone to submit examples of measures and best practices and lessons learned from the realization of farmers' rights. If you have, this is an open-ended invitation to everyone, to all the governments and to all the stakeholders. So please feel free to contact us, to write to us, to get more information, or to see what are the existing submissions from the treaty website. With that, I would like to end my presentation. And again, I would like to thank you, the organizers, for this opportunity to present farmers' rights under the international treaty. And thank you very much for your attention. And please feel free to email or to chat for any questions and clarifications. Thank you so much.
The concept of farmers' right to genetic resources, which
Hello.
can certainly ensure conservation of indigenous knowledge, which is very important. We can entertain a few minutes for questions if you would like to ask. Dr. Azar, please.
Hello.
Dr. Azar.
Can you hear me?
Je suis connecté.
Can you hear me?
Je suis connecté. J'ai vu
go ahead.
en direct que ça.
I want to, the basic question I want to ask is that
أنا je pense j'ai un problème de caméra ما كان
the land.
أنا ما كنتشافش.
Hello.
Please turn off your speakers, please.
مي أنا je suis connecté دابا أنا كنسمع هذا كيهضر.
Can I speak, please?
Yeah, you can.
Yes. My question is that the land of the farmers is a basic right of the farmers. The land has to remain fertile and utilizable. Now, because of the climate change, and which produces desertification and drought, and it's affecting the quality of the land, what is being done against that to preserve the rights of the farmers to their land?
This question for Dr. Mary.
Yes, thank you for the very important question. And land, the right to land is very important. And in the international treaty, although this is interconnected, unfortunately, the international treaty, the farmers' rights, only is specific for plant genetic resources. I personally agree that it is very important, but for the treaty, it is only the right related to plant genetic resources. However, many governments, like for example, Bolivia, the Philippines, and other countries, they consider the rights of farmers as a bundle of rights to land, rights access to water, access to natural resources. So as I've said, the international treaty gives the responsibility to national government to implement the rights of farmers. So in this regard, governments are free to choose their legal measures, including the rights to land, the rights to natural resources, and everything. So as I've said, many countries who provided their measures for the implementation of farmers' rights have included this aspect of access to land or rights to land. So I hope I'm able to provide an answer to your question.
Can I ask a question? I ask a question?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah. In fact, this is a very important, presentation in terms of generating rights for the farmer. You know, we used to have plant breeder rights, and in Pakistan, we got approved the plant breeder rights in 2016. You see, it's a long history. I mean, we've been struggling a lot. I mean, presenting policy to the government and other stakeholders. In fact, there are three entities. One is government, the other plant breeders, and then the farmer. And we have to integrate, because in different countries, there are different procedures, different rules and regulations related to agricultural production. For example, in China, you see, agriculture is being regulated entirely by the government. I mean, you cannot implement the rules and regulation or the rights which are being formulated by the FAO, you see. And same is the case in other country. I think the point raised by Dr. Asghar is very important because in most of the cases, particularly in OIC countries, we are prone to abiotic stresses. Environment, which we've been talking, I mean, His Excellency, you see, Prince Hassan Dalal, you see, he talked about many things related to the environment. And definitely, we have to focus on environment. We have to focus on social setup. We have to focus on the government policies, you see. As I was discussing about China, because I have been visiting so many times, you see, and looking at the agriculture policies and implementation, even not a single farmer is allowed to plant a single plant, you see, according to his own way. I mean, whatsoever are the instruction imparted by the government, he will strictly follow those in letter and spirit. So in some other country, like in African country, there is a latitude. I mean, farmer can do whatever they like, whatever they want to plant. And same is the case with seed preservation, seed propagation, because in some countries, seed is being provided by the government agency, but in some farmers, they have the latitude to produce seed of their own need, and it depends whatsoever is the quality. I mean, they have to depend on that. But wherever there is a government involved, you see, then there is a regulation, there is a stringent policy which they have to adhere to. So my point, I mean, is very clear. And in the summary, you see the second point which you have enumerated there is very important, because there should be generalized rules regarding farmer rights, but you cannot impose to the government, you see, pertinent government. So
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Abdullah?
Yeah.
Yes, I have finished.
You finished?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Dweri, Dr. Mahmoud?
Thank you, Dr. Al-Musa, and thank you, Ms. Mary. May I just comment, during the negotiations for the plant genetic resources, I was the director of the plant production and the protection division in FAO. And my division helped a lot in preparing for the plant genetic resources treaty. And it happened, this was from 96 to the year 2001. That's what she said.
Mahmoud, you have some problems in your internet. Dr. Dweri, may we have, in the meantime, Dr. Khalid Abu Layla? Please, go ahead. Dr. Khalid.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Abdullah. Your Royal Highness and Your Excellencies and distinguished professors, it's my pleasure to be part of this distinguished symposium, or let's say conference. As I'm speaking as the focal point of the national focal point of Jordan to the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. And I am part of the intergovernmental technical group of Farmers' Rights. We carried out very important tasks toward securing distinguished or articulated measures for farmers' rights to help countries toward addressing farmers' rights And those measures extrapolated from the Article 9 of the treaty that secured all of the rights for farmers in different sub-articles. And I would like to stress here the importance of implication of the farmers' rights that is inspired from the treaty, not only for the food security, but securing the farmers' rights as the custodians of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. When I say PGRFA or plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, I mean the traditional genuine genetic resources that are very much adaptable to our local conditions. And those are the species that allow the whole ecosystem to flourish and to prosper, because they allow the various types and different hierarchy of biodiversity to occur, and so keeps the ecosystem services being provided whilst having the produce of such land races and important traditional commercial genetic resources. However, for this, lots to be done on the national level. I'm not speaking only about Jordan, but as whole, the different sub-articles that Mary mentioned, including the protection of traditional knowledge. She mentioned here the indigenous people. I would mention here also that in Jordan or in the Middle East in general, we don't have this is not really fitting our farmers. We do not have indigenous people, but rather we have, let's say, traditional people or traditional farmers. Also, the equitable participation in sharing the benefits, and this is being secured by the international treaty and the Nagoya Protocol of the CBD. Also, maybe my colleague Dr. Hani Shaer will be commenting on this. Also, the recognition, this is Article 9.1, the recognition of the enormous contribution that the farmers and indigenous people have provided also, and the making available and free exchange of their traditional seeds for strengthening the seed system of theirs that is away or without being intervened with the formal seed systems. And I would like here to stress about the upcoming hopefully national gene bank. We have also the National Gene Bank of Jordan that is really hosting more than 5,000 accessions of traditional species. But we are hoping in the near future, in collaboration with the Hashemite University, because of their generous fund, we are on the way toward building the National Gene Bank of Jordan that will be helping not only Jordan, but the whole region. And we are anticipating a very vital role of this gene bank to secure the plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, and particularly the local land races, especially those that have been neglected and they are abandoned, to be revived and to be used again for the sake of prosperity of our country and the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Hani?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Abdullah, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation and thanks to His Royal Highness for his enlightening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to make some comments on Dr. Mary's speech because she mentioned a lot of international instruments for safeguarding and conservation that are related to conservation of biodiversity. I would like to draw your attention to the UNESCO 2003 Convention for Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage. I am part of the capacity building team of the UNESCO capacity building team for this convention. and I am currently the Dean of the Faculty of Archaeology and Anthropology at Yarmouk University. In fact, this convention gives us a good opportunity to safeguard the biodiversity. One of its domains that has been defined is the knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe. As this convention concentrates on the intangible cultural heritage as it's created by communities, a response to their environment and their interaction with nature, farming, fishing, hunting, pastoral, or food gathering practices are, for instance, associated to natural resources and spaces. Safeguarding these elements demands recognition of the community's rights to approach and use its resources in an ecologically sustainable way to reduce the impact of these practices can have on environment. The relationship between the natural capital and intangible cultural heritage can necessitate regulation to control the effects of safeguarding activities on the environment. We need, in fact, to address how traditional knowledge, values, and practices accumulated and renewed across generations as part of the intangible cultural heritage have guided the human societies in their interactions with the surrounding natural environments for millennia. We have to explore also through this convention. I mean, it gives us the opportunity and promotes our thinking about the conservation and safeguarding of traditional knowledge. We have to explore the contribution of intangible cultural heritage to environmental sustainability as recognized in several fields, such as biodiversity conservation, sustainable natural resources management. Taking this convention for the strategic plans on the local and international levels will help us to explore how knowledge, values, and practices of intangible cultural heritage related to the environment has the capacity to evolve and adapt for more sustainable use of natural resources, enabling also communities to better face natural disasters and the challenges of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hani. Now we may proceed